Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast for 2015. On this week's podcast, I look back at the Sports Geek origin story and I look forward. What's your sports biz resolution?
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who knows about technology and stuff. Thanks Chevy guy, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. That's right, my name is Sean Callanan, and like Chevy Guy, I do know technology and stuff. I wish I'd come up with that tagline before the Chevy Guy did. Welcome back. 2015 is upon us. Took a little bit of a break from the podcasting scene over the Christmas, New Year period. I hope you had a great holiday period and a great time connecting with friends and family, but now 2015 is upon us and we've got to get started. This week's podcast, a little bit different. I've had a few people ask me to dive into my story a little bit more, and I couldn't figure out a way to interview myself, but luckily enough, I was at Entrepreneur Club recently, and I was interviewed by Dom McKenna, and he pretty much grilled me on all things Sports Geek and how I got started and what I've done. Just a quick word of warning. This was a public speaking gig in a bar, and there is a little bit of explicit language. So if you've got some kids in the car or someone else is listening, you have been warned. It's not too bad. I've just gone a little bit Gary V on the speaking scene.
Tonight we've got Sean Callanan. Now Sean Callanan is the sports geek, and what is really cool about Sean and his story is he is a geek. He's an awesome geek, but he's a geek in sports who took his passion for being into sports and monetized it and turned it into a very profitable business. But not only turned it into a business, he actually built an entire industry off it in Australia, the first of its kind. And Sean is now the leading sports digital strategist for the entire country. And he's got clients, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Can you take us through a few of the clients quickly before we start?
We can. So I work with teams, leagues, teams, and athletes. So from a league point of view, working with guys like the FFA and A-League and the Socceroos around the World Cup. From a team point of view, in the AFL, work with the Pies, the Eagles, the Crows, the Hawks. I'm sounding very Gary Ayres-like here, aren't I? And then in the NRL, Manly, the Rabbitohs, the Storm. I think 3 out of the last 4 NRL premiers have been Sports Geek clients. That's what I lead now with at the NRL. Winning is the way to go, and you need me on board. Primarily working with teams around their digital strategy and what they're trying to do in the digital space.
Right. So we might actually just roll straight into it and have a chat. I know you're going to stand.
You're going to sit. I'm going to stand.
Right.
I'm going to go Steve Vallis on you and never sit.
Never sit down.
So Steve is the proprietor of Honey Bar, and I've never seen him sit down.
The Wanderer. Cool. So why don't we rip into it? Tell us, give us your background. Tell us about Sports Geek, and give us some context about who you are.
Yeah. So I guess my story from a Sports Geek point of view is before I was Sports Geek, I was just a plain old geek. So anyone here who's a coder, developer in the audience, who still gets on the tools, makes their money through a keyboard, I was that for 15 years. I worked in various industries, but I was always a massive sports fan, have been for many a year, and I was always frustrated with what the IT industry delivered to the sports market. For those of you who do live in the work in the IT industry, you know there's a few cowboys out there that will deliver you a website and then just hand it to people and then run away, and the people who don't know IT and don't know web are just left with this screaming baby of a website. And I saw that in the sports industry and was frustrated as an IT guy, but also frustrated as a sports fan. So around 5 years ago, when I finished up my last gig, I dabbled in sport over about almost 10 years. So I'm the guy that gave Caroline Wilson her first TV gig. That normally loses the audience. When we did a TV show on Channel 31 with the Western Bulldogs, where we did a 4-week pilot series, effectively, like talking footy, throughout the final series, and we're all teed up to do a 22-week club TV. This is in 1998. And and unfortunately Foxtel came in and gave every club a free club TV show, and the deal fell through. All the TV shows were pretty bad, and they lasted for one season. So that was me dabbling in sport, but I was really struggling because I was working in IT. And for those of you who don't work in IT, it's really good pay. So I was well paid, and it's like, why would I want to go and start my own business when I'm getting paid too much money? And that's what I think. I think people in IT get paid too much money. Good luck to you. I know I'm not begrudging you anything, but I just thought it was overpaid. So that really stopped me from making the leap and starting Sports Geek. But 5 years ago, I decided when I finished up my last job, I thought it was time for me to give it a crack. And when I started Sports Geek, I thought I was going to be an IT consultant that would help weed out the cowboys and the poor delivery of IT into sports. And it wasn't just little guys; like it was big guys like Telstra doing terrible jobs with websites and things like that. Because I knew databases, I knew how systems worked, I knew how websites worked from what I'd done in my work experience. But when I started investigating the space, I was looking at what teams were doing both here in Australia, but also looking at the US and the UK. Both investigating it from the online point of view, but then I also went over to the States to go and sort of do what was the first Sports Geek trip, and all my friends are quite jealous because I just go over to the US and say it's a research trip. And I learnt that from the Western Bulldogs. So the way we got paid for the TV show was we went on a study trip. And that study trip included the Seattle Seahawks, the Denver Broncos, the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the CFL, the Indianapolis Colts, and we met with all these teams with executives from the Western Bulldogs. So when I started Sports Geek, I wanted to do that again. And so I went to Los Angeles, Dallas, and New York, and it was part research trip, part networking, part secret shopper. So I was going into stadiums, seeing what they were doing, seeing what wasn't being done in Australia, and also seeing what digital was being done in the stadium. So you can investigate all you can from a online point of view, but what were they doing in the stadium? So it was a real eye opener for me. I guess extending what I already knew and sort of proving that what I was thinking was right. And then the other side of it was that this whole social media thing was happening then. So Facebook was starting to come online from a sports point of view. Like teams were starting to set up Facebook pages, teams were starting to tweet. 3 months earlier, Shaquille O'Neal gets on Twitter and starts making that a mainstream thing. And I was right in that space of I'm using all these tools, and I started then going to all the teams and saying, not only do you need to be on these platforms, you need sports geeks in these positions. So it wasn't just you need to do it, you need to have people that understand the tech and understand the nuances of using the tools, but then also have to understand the sport and the team and what it's like to be a fan. And so I was in a pretty unique situation in that space. Probably the best example of that is, I'd spent about 9 months sort of banging the drum, blogging, writing posts, scoring what teams were doing online, and it was all pretty much to build myself up to be a thought leader, I guess, is the term that gets used and bandied around today. But I was pretty much just saying, this is what I think. This is what I think teams should do. This is what I think athletes should do. This is what media outlets should do. And I was talking to TV and print and radio and teams and pretty much telling them you're doing it wrong. One of my first clients that I was able to secure and actually get money from, which is always great, getting a client that gives you money, was Collingwood. And partly, I probably had no right to land Collingwood as a client. But I went in there as a Collingwood fan. That's normally the second part where I lose the audience. So I went in there as a Collingwood fan and I said, look, you've got 50,000 Facebook fans. I'm a Collingwood member and I'm I'm disgusted with that number. Like Collingwood is, Eddie's up there spouting how many fans they had. And I said, you shouldn't have that number. You should have a better number than that. And so
They are the best team in Melbourne.
From a follower's point of view, and I'm not going to lose the audience, Dom. I will soon. I will. Eventually I'll lose them. So this was August 2010. And I said, look, if you do what I tell you to, because they weren't really using the platform and they weren't treating it with enough respect and using it the way the fans were using it. And so I said, look, if you do what I tell you to do, we will double that fan base by the grand final. So 6 weeks away. And so I said, you've got to start using the platform the way the fans use it. You've got to give them the room to celebrate and all of those things. So really engage and show the fans that they were going to use the platform that in the same way that the fans were. So luckily, 2 grand finals later, and 6 weeks later, they hit 100,000. They hit 100,000 Facebook fans, and that was a real big win for me from a case study point of view to show them that I knew what I was talking about. I mean, yes, winning helps, and it always does. Talking to the guys at the San Francisco Giants, Brian Sarabian, he says winning is the best marketing strategy a sports team can have, and I don't disagree with him. But the thing for me is you've got to make sure, and this applies to sports, but also applies to business. You've got to make sure that your fans are ready to celebrate your wins. And that's pretty much what we're setting Collingwood up for in that instance. So getting Collingwood on board and getting Manly on board, it sort of just started, clients started, walking in the door if they're doing that in a digital form.
So can I just rewind with you? So did you make the jump? Did you build this on the side and then make the jump, or did you save up enough from IT from your business that you went, stuff this, I'm going to do Sports Geek? Or did you transition? What was because a lot of people in the room, I've seen the colours coming in that transition phase or have a job that want to be an entrepreneur. Like, how did you actually do it?
So it was something that I was always working on, and I never had the courage to make the leap. Just let me. Unfortunately, I lost my wife to breast cancer in 2008. And if you don't want to have a fuck me moment and don't waste your life, that's it. So that gave me both the direction and a little bit of buffer to go, I'm going to give this a crack. And, bless her cotton socks, that's what it enabled me to do. Not everyone gets that opportunity, so I wasn't going to waste it. But it was something that I was always working towards, and it was really just that, life is too short to not go at it and go at it hard. So, yeah, I wasn't expecting to, and you didn't know that. So, and I'm not going to lie why, but yeah, Bunny allowed me to give it a kickstart and give me the kick up the bum that I needed. But now that I look back on it, and I was joking before about worrying about how much money you have and all of that kind of thing, it's all in your head. When I was in IT thinking I'm earning a lot of money and I don't want to go and start my own business, there's a lot of people in the room that have got red dots and green dots, and that was me. It was a brainwave that I had when I was having a podcast with Dom. The green dots mean you're an entrepreneur and the red dots mean you're an employee. Put your hand up if you've got a green dot and you actually pay yourself less than when you used to have a job. Okay, so, and it's because, I'm now building something, and I only know that now. I only know that on the other side of the fence. I didn't know that when I was, doing TV shows for the Western Bulldogs, that kind of thing. If I'd have known that then, I may have made that leap earlier.
So talk about it. Tell us how what I love about your brand, I'm just going to show you his socks real quick. It's a bit weird, but have a look at this. This is passion right here. So this is a pair of socks.
The socks are above the Sports Geek branded shoes.
I know, I was going to mention that. I was leading downward. So if you look at these socks, that's a pair of 1989 Dominique Wilkins socks. Pull it up again and give me a little
It'll
show.
come up on the screen. Everyone should be using the hashtag #EntClubMelb to get on the big screen. We want to be trending.
So these socks, Dominique Wilkins socks, lives and breathes it, sweats in it. And then the shoes are Sports Geek Adidas shoes, custom made. I love it. So what I like about Sean is he's very passionate about his business, but his life's his business and his business is his life. And we were talking about this on the podcast the other day. You meet some people, particularly people that work in a job that want to section their job from the project that they're working on, from their relationship, and they try to put everything into boxes. And, you can't do everything. You've got to have this elusive thing called work-life balance, which is a crock of shit. So tell us about your opinion with your life's your business is your life.
I'm with you on the balance. And I love the quote that Mark Boris gives in his book, What It Takes. I think it's along the lines, I'm going to mangle it. It's along the lines, if you think, if it's the grass is green and you think running your own business is going to be great and you're going to get all this life balance, he goes, you're fooling yourself. It will consume your life, but it'll consume your life in a good way. It's not bad. But it'll consume your life. And so when people say, how long do you work? And it's like, well, I'm never not working. I will be watching Twitter and seeing what's being said while I'm watching a TV show. It's still working. Or I will be thinking about a presentation that I've got to do tomorrow and I haven't really finished it yet right now. It's all about trends for next year. They'll come to me eventually. But it is always, and this to a certain degree is working, but it's not working. It's like I don't feel like it's working. So that's where I see the work-life balance is that if you love what you're doing and you're passionate about it, it doesn't feel like work, and that's the joy of being an entrepreneur. And I hope I'm seeing nodding heads in the room and of that because you want to get up and go at it every day.
Absolutely. So tell us how you've used podcasting, because that impresses the life out of me. You've used podcasting for not only Sports Geek, for Beers, Blokes and Business, which is another project, which is what you guys hit number one podcast in Australia? Yeah, we
snapshotted that on iTunes the day it happened, because that's how the iTunes rankings work. It's a mysterious thing.
So tell us about your one, then tell us about Beers and Blokes.
Yeah, so from a podcasting point of view, so I was blogging about sports and digital and on a number of things, and I had an itch that I've been doing radio. So I do radio with ABC Grandstand with Francis, and I do on SEN. And I was putting the audio clips up on the site. It wasn't really getting much traction. And then May last year, I thought I'm going to do a specific podcast for Sports Geek, looking at the sports digital space. And one of the primary reasons is I'm shit at writing. I'm not really good at writing a blog post. The sentences don't make sense. They make sense in my head, but when you read them, not so much. Whereas as Sam says, I give good voice. I can, or my dad would say, I can, talk the leg off a chair. Real dad joke. So I started doing interviews with people around the world, with people I'd connected with, and it's been a really good way for me to, I guess, express my opinion, chat to people who are my peers or people who work in the industry around the world. And then because I started it, I went, I just got really full of myself, and I went, oh my God, people need to hear more of me. I need to get all my mates together and we'll talk about our businesses. Everyone will love that. And we're going to drink beer. So Beers, Blokes and Business started August last year, and it literally is that. It's blokes drinking beer, talking about business. And so there's 7 blokes that are in the roster. There's a few in the room tonight. And we pretty much just talk about anything related to our businesses. And what we've found looking at the stats and the downloads and things is it's the really boring stuff or the things that we think is boring that really resonate with the crowd. So some of the big topics that we've done that have done really well are facing fear as an entrepreneur. We did one on chasing invoices. That was really, it was like people go, I have that trouble all the time. So as well as, growing your business, staff motivation was one that we did that really struck a chord with people because, this is why groups like this are really good. As a business owner or an entrepreneur, you don't get to talk to your employees about the problems that you're having. So you need to have a network where you can talk about it. And so the blokes was my network. And so I went, it's really, I'll be honest, it was a scam really for me to get all the IP out of my mates while we drink beer. So, and it's worked quite well. A few of the blokes have transformed their business and changed the way they do things from things that they've learned in the discussions.
Can you put your hand up if you listen to that podcast in the room? A number of people. It's great.
It's good to see the blokes put their hands up as well because it's really important that we listen to ourselves.
So not only, apart from learning all your mates' tricks,
yep.
How have you found that platform has been in building your credibility?
So it's been, terribly effective. And it's almost the best sales lead tool I have. Try calling someone up that you want them to be your client, and rather than saying, hey, can you order my services, how can I help you? Call them up and say, hey, how would you like to just talk about how awesome you are for 30 minutes to a really big audience? The amount of times I get shit yeah as an answer, actually I don't, Americans never say that, but I get a lot of people responding to say, yeah, I would like to because they want to, put themselves up on a pedestal and talk about their successes. So it's been really effective for me as far as, as a sales lead and knocking down the door. And then the other side of it is there's a lot of people who are listening that are my future clients. So, it's very niche in that it's for people who work in sport, in the sports digital realm. I mean, if you love marketing and you love sport, give it a listen. There's some really good guests. Because there's always takeaways. You can learn stuff about digital marketing from the Boston Celtics or the Portland Trailblazers or Arsenal. And I've had all of those guys, on my podcast. But it's pretty mind-blowing when I get an email from the managing editor of Arsenal and he goes, I'm listening to the podcast, I'd make this suggestion. I'm going, holy fuck, you're from Arsenal. Why is someone from Arsenal? It's really humbling. And now he's a good mate and he's been on the podcast a couple of times. So, I didn't expect it to have that reach, but it does in that people find out about it. There's, word of mouth and that kind of thing. So I have a pretty good, track record of being able to ask someone and, get them on, and same as with the blokes to say, can you just come and tell me all your secrets so I can tell everybody? It works quite well.
Well, you're doing it for me right now. Works really well.
It's a scam. I've got fallen for it again.
So tell us about the big one. How did you nab Mark Cuban? Who here doesn't know who Mark Cuban is? So Mark Cuban is a billionaire who owns the Dallas Mavericks. He's on Shark Tank. Big shot. So tell us how you got Mark.
So the way I describe Mark Cuban is Mark Cuban's a sports geek just like me. He's just got a bit more money. And I've been using that joke for 5 years. And so to go back to my initial Sports Geek trip, so I'd been blogging for about 6 months, and I said, I'm going to do this trip. It's pretty much, I'm going to go to some baseball stadiums, some basketball games. And I blogged. I said, these are the things I'm going to do. I'm going to get a photo with a couple of trophies. I'm going to see a game at Madison Square Garden, and I'm going to shoot hoops with Mark Cuban. And so Mark Cuban, owner of the Mavericks, if any of you listen to radio via the internet, you have Mark Cuban to thank. He took a microphone up to his transistor radio, as my dad would call it, and he streamed it on the internet. and he sold it to Yahoo for, I think it was about 300 million at that stage, at the top of the dot-com boom. And he's done quite well to turn that into $2.5 billion.
What's the name of the business? Broadcast.com?
Broadcast.com. And so I started hounding him. This is back in 2010. I've blogged. I'm going to go shoot hoops before a Mavs game with Mark Cuban. And he did email me back that time and said sorry because I tried his Mavs email and his other email, and then I found someone who told me his other email, and I emailed that. And he pretty much gave me the, go away. But he was polite. He said, sorry, I don't meet with anyone. Have a good time on your trip. That trip did coincide with me going, ended up with me holding Dirk Nowitzki's pants in the Dallas Mavs locker room via Twitter.
How did you do that?
How to do that?
Yep.
Glad you asked.
Do you know who he is, everyone? Dirk Nowitzki?
Dirk Nowitzki is the Dallas Mavericks, I guess, superstar, plays for the Mavs. So part of the trip I was at LA Dodgers Stadium, tweeting away using the hashtag SportsGeekTrip, and Jill, this random follower, just started tweeting back to me saying, you should come to a game. I said, I'd love to. And then we figured out that we're both going to be in Dallas at the same time. So I went to the Dallas Mavericks-Lakers game. So Kobe Bryant and Phil Jackson were still coaching. So Kobe wasn't on a shit team like he is now. And I've turned up to the game. I've tweeted Mark Cuban and said, hey, Mark, I'm just sitting behind you. If you want to come up and say hello, more than welcome. And then I've also been communicating, and this is part of how I've built my business. I'd been communicating via Twitter and LinkedIn with Brad Main, who was the CEO of the arena. And so because I was using the networks, I'd connected with him on Twitter, then I'd send him an invite and we'd connect him. We've been having emails backwards and forwards about trying to meet, to get a tour of the facility, all of that kind of stuff. But I hadn't connected with him. So I've turned up to the game and I've already organised to meet up with Jill, my new Twitter friend that we'd started tweeting at the Dodgers. And she said, okay, we'll meet at halftime of the Mavs-Lakers games. I said, cool. So I'm in my seats, talking to my mate Joe next to me, and I'm travelling by myself, trying to meet all these things, meet all these people and things like that. And then I hear, Sean, there's Brad Main, the CEO of the arena, standing next to me. He goes, come up to the suite. And, I've gone, sweet. Joe's gone next to me and goes, they're going to have food in there. So I was in a bit of a dilemma because I'm meant to meet Jill. What do? Go up to the suite, or go see Jill? So what would you do, really? So I've gone up to the suite. And Brad is introducing me to all the people in the... he goes, here you go, Sean. We've got some Fosters on ice for you. I've gone, thanks, Brad. I'll be very polite. I'll drink them all, but Australians don't drink Fosters. And then he introduced me to all the people in the suite. One of those people was Jill. Jill, who tweeted with me 3 days earlier, she was in the corporate suite going, Brad, you got to get this guy, Sports Geek, up here. He's doing a tour. He's got all these people. I didn't have people. Didn't have any people. And so that's how I've gone into the suite, watched Dirk Nowitzki score his 20,000 NBA point, and then the next night I came back to watch the hockey. And Brad gave me a tour during the game, and he goes, oh, come in here. And then we're in the Mavs locker room. He goes, here, hold these. So I've got a picture of me holding Dirk Nowitzki's pants the day after he scored his 20,000 NBA point. So that's the story.
Good story.
So, but I guess that's the long tail story of how did I get Mark Cuban, which we're getting back to.
So what was Jill like?
Jill?
Yeah.
So Jill ran, and this is what you don't know when you're connecting with people. Either these events are online. Jill said, her Twitter bio said, fun-loving girl who's into fundraising. I think that was her title, her bio. And I was just pretty much connecting and talking to anyone. That's what Twitter was like back in the day. You talk to everybody. It doesn't happen so much now. There's so many people there. But her fundraising was fundraising for stadiums to raise more money to build more facilities. So everyone in that super box ran a stadium. So there was people from the Philadelphia Spectrum, there was people from LA because they were there for meetings and Brad was on the board. So it was completely, fortuitous. And I'm still, I still chat with Jill. We're still connected on LinkedIn. And last time I was in San Diego, I caught up with her. So you just never know where these connections come from. So fast forward 4 years, or 5 years almost. Been following Mark Cuban, and he's always been the big shark. He's a guy that I want to talk to. He's a guy that I would want on the podcast. But I was never one that I was never going to push in my chips too early. I was never going to say, I want to interview on my radio show when I wanted the biggest bang. And so he started doing Shark Tank. I watched Shark Tank. And then he started his app called Cyberdust. So his app, has anyone heard of Cyberdust? I'm going to give it a plug anyway. So Cyberdust is it's a WhatsApp for adults. It's probably the best way to put it. It's all about you send a message, it gets destroyed, no one can see it, no one can snapshot it. And so Mark, I knew his story behind why he developed it. He was the founder, or he's the guy that's pumping the money into it, is probably a better way of putting it. He was chased by the SEC for insider trading. They pretty much took his texts and went, those texts look like someone who does insider trading, therefore you must be an inside trader. And he went, bullshit. He got off on all the charges, but he's become very paranoid about privacy and what he sends out. Because, if I send you a text, you own it. You can do whatever you want with it. Hey, look what Sean sent me. And that was his concern. So he started Cyberdust. So I got on Cyberdust, and it's a real, if there's any new platforms out there that, the earlier that you can be on there, the better, because you can connect with people in this uncluttered environment. So I got on Cyberdust, quite early. This is only a couple of months ago, and he's sending out quotes of the day, inspirational stuff, the usual, entrepreneurs are great, which I love, right? But he's sending it out every day to try to inspire. And so a couple of times I've replied back to him, hey, Mark, would you like to be on the podcast? Donuts. And then a couple of weeks ago now, he put out a message, similar stuff. And I replied to him and said, hey, Mark, I work with a lot of sports teams. How can sports teams use your product? Because I knew the Mavs are using it, as an example. And so he's come back and he's come back with the typical Mark Cuban, bombastic, I'll tell you type response. He goes, there's more athletes than sports teams in the world using Cyberdust. And I've gone, yeah, that's cool. I'm all in for athletes. I'm telling athletes to use it. How can teams use it? I'd love to have you on the podcast. Here's who I've had on the show. And I've given him a link to my guest list. So I've had 90 people on. So Arsenal, Boston Celtics, Portland Trailblazers, that kind of thing. And so he sort of just left it there. And then he's saying, why athletes use it well. And I said, look, I'm convinced, mate. I'm telling athletes to use it. I've cleaned up enough dick pics in my lifetime. I'm the guy, when there's a dick on the internet, they call. Okay? At the moment, NRL is over-indexing over AFL, but I'm the guy they call. So I've pretty much said that to Cuban. I said, I'm the guy they call. I've seen enough. And he's gone, yeah, you know it. Right? And so we're having this backwards and forwards on Cyberdust. And so then what I did to sort of lock in the deal, because they've sort of planted the seed with him, and we're having this pretty genuine conversation. I can't snapshot it because I'm on Cyberdust. So you're going to have to believe me. But I go onto Twitter and say, what do people think about Cyberdust? I'm all in for athletes, but I'm not sure about teams. And I've just tagged the Cyberdust app. I haven't tagged Cuban or anything. And a few of my friends, Mick's in the room. Where are you, Mick? He's got a camera. I shouldn't be able to... There he is over there. So Mick Russell replied, and a few other friends are asking me, what is it? How do I do it? And I'm telling them about his product on Twitter at the same time. And I've said something wrong. Like I've said, it's okay, you can send a tweet, no one can take a screenshot. And Mark Cuban has come in over the top and corrected me. And I'm like, oh, we've nearly got him here.
Did you do that on purpose?
Did I do it on purpose?
Yeah.
Of course I did it on purpose. But I hadn't tagged him because a couple of weeks earlier he'd retweeted me when I'd given him one of his quotes. So he was sort of getting close and getting close. I'd lined up guys like Mick and said, get ready, just start just start mentioning that he should come on the podcast. And then I open up Cyberdust. He says, cool, just sign up for your newsletter. Send me an email and we'll set up a time. I'm like... so I had to send all these DMs. Don't tweet him now. Don't tweet him. I've got him. It's cool. So I sent him an email. And the thing is, I had his email. Like, I didn't need his email. I wanted his permission. So, I had his email from last time he emailed me back. So if you want to email Mark Cuban, mcuban@gmail.com. Now, doesn't mean he's going to open it or reply. You've got to give him a reason to spend his time. And I'd followed him and watched him, and he's always big on, my time is money, it's really valuable to me, that kind of thing. So I was really conscious of, I'm not going to give him something that's not worth his time. So I had a pretty good value proposition to say, I'm going to talk up your product. I've got an audience of people that want to hear about your product. Do you want to come on? So we had a bit of backwards and forwards. I said, here you go, pick a time. I use a tool called Time Trade, which is really good. You just click a button and book it in. And he goes, I don't know when I am, where I am. Talk to my VA. I said, that's cool. We've got, 20 minutes, 30 minutes would be great. He goes, no, it's okay, Sean. We'll do an hour. So I was lucky enough through my connections with the ABC. I was able to go into the studio next to John Fain, record it there. So there was no issues. And we had, a really cool conversation. And I guess that's the part that's really important to me when I'm doing a podcast is, yes, I'm interviewing them, but I also want to make sure that people are listening know that I'm not just interviewing them, that I can give my opinion. So the first couple of questions are really critical when I'm talking to someone like Mark Cuban to go, they sort of go, hang on, this Aussie guy knows what he's talking about. And after that, we were able to go anywhere. So we talked about we talked about Cyberdust, we talked about Expire, we talked about his experiences on Shark Tank, we talked about the changing landscape of the NBA ownership, we talked about, what he looks for in, investing in products and stuff like that. So, and I was pretty happy. I got all my plugs in for all the stuff that I wanted to get in all the way through. And I'm hoping that he's going to be, come to a Seek conference next year in San Francisco.
Great. Good lead in. Very, very well done. So we'll talk about Seek conference, but tell me, have you used that now? Because that's a real winner. Like, you can open any door with a Mark Cuban interview. Have you pulled on any clients? Have you got any clients in the pipeline as a result of that?
Actually, the funny thing is, I followed up the Mark Cuban interview with an interview with Brad Main. So Brad, if we wind back to the story, it all weaves together. Brad was the CEO of American Airlines Centre all that time ago, and I thought, it's a nice little closure of the story. So Brad now is the CEO of MetLife Stadium, where the Giants and the Jets play in New York. And it's actually funny that podcast landed me the NRL because they're looking at stadiums and stuff. So, the Cuban interview helps land interviews a little bit quicker. You may have listened to a podcast with Mark Cuban. It's also helped downloads and just general awareness of the podcast. So we did 10,000 downloads last month, and so that was a really big jump. And it hasn't gone away, but it was sort of growing from about episode 50. So it's sort of it's a case study in persistence. It's like plugging away, and then for some reason, episode 50, the downloads start going up. Now, Dave Burtonshaw at the Adelaide Crows is trying to claim the credit for that because he was on episode 50, but I think it's a combination of, really good guests, long time, and then the marketing that I did around Seek conference in Miami this year.
That's no different to this thing, the Entrepreneur Club. We did 3 years, and we were last March 2013, we had 1,300 members, and now we've got, I think, 4,900. And that's in what? I can't even count properly, but that's in a very short time. But it's actually not the last year. It's the compound effect of the last 3 years. And let's lead into the thing before we talk about the Seek conference and finish up. Tell me about how important is the hustle for an entrepreneur? Because there's a lot of people here that want to be entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs, but people who actually want to be and have the desire. And how important is the hustle? Because marketing's sexy, social media is sexy, but If you heard his story, he talked about how long it took him to land Mark Cuban and that persistence and consistency on it. How important is that?
It's very important, and I'm very mindful of, first of all, empty glasses. I'm not offended if you go up and get a beer. I encourage it because there's a really good podcast by the man who owns the bar on hustle. And
It was smooth.
It was the best segue. I'm very good at a segue. Hustle. You've just got to. It's got to be all the time. And the Cuban one for me is like I knew I wanted to get him, but I didn't. I wasn't going to waste my shot with him. Not that I didn't think I only had one shot, but I wanted to set up all the things. So. Like I do say a lot now, I've got a podcast for that, because I'm going to do that right now. The podcast we did with Will Anderson for Beers Blokes was a really good example of that, of the hustle. So Will, if you don't know, comedian, he came on and talked about the business of being funny. He didn't tell any jokes, although it was very funny. Samar and I were there, sort of interviewing him. I think how many questions did we get in, Steve? 3 questions? 2, yeah. He gave one answer in 4 parts over 20 minutes, I think. So he can talk. Yeah. Don't ruin the no more cheap sheet stuff. It wasn't intimating to start talking. But one of the things, so one-way showman here, like shut up you blokes, pretty much. But pretty much what he was describing of his hustle and I guess it's something that I'm sort of doing a little bit, is he doesn't know which thing is going to come off. So for him, it was, Gruen, right? He did not know Gruen was going to be this massive juggernaut of a TV show. So he describes his life and his entrepreneurial life as spinning plates. And there's a lot of hustle in keeping all those plates spinning. And so for me, podcasting, spinning plate. Working with clubs, spinning plate. Working with leagues, spinning plate. So the hustle is running up and down and keeping all those plates spinning, but it's really important because the one over here that you keep going becomes something bigger. And to a certain degree, that's what Beers Blokes became. Like, I just thought, we'll have a chat and see what happens. And then when you release it and it's in the top 10 of business podcasts, it's like, hang on, we're guys drinking beer. But, what we're talking about, the honesty that the beer brings, becomes pretty entertaining. So, hustle's super important.
So what we'll do, tell us quickly about the SEAT conference, and then I want to take you into social media and we'll wrap up. So tell us about SEAT and your involvement in that and how it's helped you pioneer what you're doing.
So SEAT conference is Sports, Entertainment, Alliance and Technology. So it's right in my wheelhouse. It's exactly what I am. And I spoke at a conference in 2010. I was one of the only Australians on the bill at a conference in Sydney in New Zealand. And Christine Stoffel was also speaking in that conference. And I've got off the stage, one of my first speaking gigs, telling people, this is what social media is in sport. And she goes, you're great, you should come to my conference next year in Los Angeles. And it was pretty much the same response as the Arsenal one. What? You want me to be in... And so I just pretty much wrote it off and went, can't be serious, like I'm just starting. But then fast forward 12 months, one of the guys who was speaking at that conference was Ted Johnson from the Minnesota Timberwolves. I sold him a product based on a demo in a keynote presentation, hadn't built it. I said, this is what I'm going to build. It's going to be really good. You want to do it? He said, yes, which is, always ask, which is one of my, I'm going back to that tenet next year, always be asking. And so I was already in the US for the NBA draft in 2011 and realised, and I started getting emails from Christine saying, SEAT conference in LA 2011. I'm like, I'm going to be there around the same time. So I said, hey, Christine, so do you want me to speak? Because you said you wanted me last year. And she said, of course. So since that time, I now curate. So that conference had 120 people in LA. and now I've helped build out 2 more tracks. There's a track for digital and a track for CRM, and I curate the digital track. There were 700 people in Miami this year, and next year is going to be in San Francisco. So it's been massive from my brand building point of view. I mean, it's effectively my marketing budget. I go over to the States and I talk, and then people come back and go, "How was America?" And it's like, it's awesome. But I do make it very hard for myself sometimes when I go to seat. So last year in Kansas City, I went. Was it 6 weeks before seat? I think 6 weeks before seat, I tore my Achilles, which I don't suggest ever doing. It is like getting shot in the back of the leg. So I was in a moon boot last year, and so everyone was making fun of me. I was hobbling around. My son was quite happy because he became my intern and he carried my bags and got stuff for me. But as a 15-year-old getting a free trip to the States, he was pretty happy. And so this year I went to Miami, fully healed, and I was set to do the opening keynote with Christine to welcome everybody to the conference on the Sunday. Arrived there on the Thursday. Did a bit of sightseeing with my son. He'd done enough good work to be able to go to Miami. It's a pretty big draw for a teenage boy to go to Miami. Friday night I was meeting with some people and chatting to them about the travel and all things like that, and then my voice lost my voice completely. For someone who gives good voice, terrible. So I hadn't seen Christine yet. Later that night I went up to see her. I said, you can imagine, one thing is when you lose your voice, it's amazing how many people talk louder to you. I'm like, hearing's okay, just can't talk. So I spent 36 hours not talking to try to get my voice back. But I was in a dilemma because I was set up to co-present the welcome address, and I ended up doing it without speaking. So you can check out the slides on LinkedIn. I built some slides. It was a bit of interpretive dance and a few jokes on PowerPoint. But I did 40 minutes of non-talking with slides that say, "Sorry, I only had one job. I've got an Australian accent. I sound like this guy," with pictures of Hugh Jackman. I had live tweets planned in the audience. I said, here I am, the tweet guy, asking people to use the hashtag. And one of my friends from the Detroit Red Wings was already keyed up with a tweet, so it came up, "Gee, Sean Callinan's rocking the keynote. He should speak less often." I got all my gags that I wanted to get out, and then 40 minutes in, they were taking a shot of the room with one of those panoramic 360-degree things, and I had everyone up who was showing how many times they'd been to seat. So it was my fourth I'm holding up. And I had these slides planned down to the second because I'm like, I've got nothing. Like, I literally was like, had nothing. About half an hour before my voice started to come back, but I wasn't trusting it enough for 40 minutes. And the guy goes, "It's going to take me 3 minutes to take the photo." I'm like, I haven't got gags for the 3 minutes of the photo. So he starts taking the photo, and I've gone, "All right, come on, everybody, smile. This is going to be the internet." And I hadn't spoken for 40 minutes. And they're like, "Hang on, this Australian's just pulling our leg this whole time." So I was able to get through the last 5 minutes of the welcome address. Everyone was like going, you can look at the photo because there's people going. Luckily enough, my voice came back enough to do my panels and stuff for the next couple of days. But yeah, it's been really integral to what I do, and I guess my brand is probably a way to put it. To be part of Seek.
Great. So in wrapping up, we'll do a question Q&A in a bit. So in wrapping up, tell us where you think, because you're really good at social media. It's very impressive. You and Steve, and quite plug. And so tell us about where you think social media is going. If you could say that in 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes. 140. Give me 140 characters. Come on.
Go.
Keep it on. So Yeah, it is. It is changing. Advertising is, don't bemoan it, embrace it. Facebook ads is the way to go if you understand who you're targeting, and not to. And my main thing, so I'm a big believer in the Facebook ads. They're doing a great job, one, pushing out my content and reaching the people I want to reach. From a Twitter point of view, to me, it's still about connecting. People want to connect with the person, not the brand. That's why I have, Sean Callanan account, and Sports Geek account. People want to talk to me, and I still think that's how Twitter is. It still needs to grow a lot, and I think some of the changes they've made recently will be important. But I think, go back to your focus on why you're doing it, and don't steer away. Don't veer away from that. So if you're trying to sell, make sure you can, have that as a really key metric for you. Don't get caught up in talking a lot about and creating community about something if you're not going to sell. And that's where the ad stuff's really key, because you can, sell tickets to events, sell tickets to games, sell merchandise, get that message across. But the main thing is to use the bloody platforms. The amount of people that I talk to that don't use the platforms and don't know all the idiosyncrasies is the main issue. Like, you want to make the mistakes in your personal account, not on a big brand account. And
like Gary Vaynerchuk says, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Yeah. I mean, Gary's a great example. You tweet Gary Vaynerchuk, he'll reply. It's him. So if he can do it, it's not that hard. If the Los Angeles Dodgers with 1 million followers, like, their aim is to reply or favourite every single positive tweet from the Dodgers, if they can do it with one guy, it's not like they've got teams, then there's no real excuse for me for any business doing it. And the thing is, that's the advantage that small business has. If you read Steve Sammartino's book, like, you've got that, you've got the opportunity to be nimble and agile that big business can't. That's the advantage that small business has.
What's the name of the book?
The book, Great Fragmentation, buy it in all good bookstores. Even the bad ones held it.
Awesome. All right, well, let's give Sean a round of applause.
Sign up for the Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/SGN.
Thanks again to Don McKenna from Entrepreneur Club. As I've said before, meetup.com. Check out meetup.com in your area and see what meetup groups are out there. Dom's done a terrific job with the Entrepreneur Club and in sort of following the lead of seeing meetup.com. And I reckon it's an underground social network for mine. Really great way to network. I've started a Sports Business Melbourne meetup group. So if you're in Melbourne, my hometown, I'm going to keep calling it the sporting capital of the world. And you'll understand when I explain what's the sporting events that are going to happen in Melbourne in January alone in the next couple of weeks. It's why it is. I still consider it the sporting capital of the world. I know I'll have an argument with guys like Richard Clark in London, but I'm happy to have that argument many, many times. But check out the Sports Biz Melbourne. We've got Asian Cup tournament starting on Friday. The Cricket World Cup starting soon. The Australian Open, the tennis. I've had the guys from Tennis Australia on the podcast previously. It's going to be a busy January here in Melbourne. So one thing I just wanted to do to wrap up this podcast is to sort of dive into what Russell Scobetti did with his hashtag Tuesday. He started a hashtag SportsBiz resolution and got people to tweet in their sports business resolution, what they're going to try to achieve in sports. For mine, I ended up stealing inspiration, I guess is a good way of putting it, from a good friend, Oscar Ugaz, who presented at SEAT in Miami and presented the opportunity that digital offers in terms of revenue in sports. And he showed the pie graph with ticketing, TV and sponsorship pretty much taking a third of the revenue that's coming into sports, and digital being this tiny little sliver. The opportunity is there to keep growing that. And that's been my New Year's resolution for the last 5 years. It's going to be something that I continue to do. And I know it's not a resolution that I'm going to give up by January 8. much like, going for a run or eating healthier and things like that always get pushed by the wayside. So, one, let us know. Send out a tweet. Make sure Russell sees it. He might update the Storify that he has there on thebusinessofsports.com. Love to hear from that. And then another thing I wanted to do that it worked really successfully with the first Beers Blokes Business podcast of 2015. I pretty much just asked for listener feedback and said, this is what I'm planning for the podcast. So same goes for you, the Sports Geek podcast listeners. I'd love to hear on one, what you like about the podcast, what you don't like about the podcast, what you want to hear more of, what you want to hear less of, what type of guests you want, that kind of thing. What guests you connect with, which guests should I talk longer to because I didn't get through everything that you wanted. And the best way to do that is to send me an email. How old school is that? Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. You can misspell my name. I won't be offended. Every version of Sean will get through. But extra points if you spell it correctly, S-E-A-N. The only way to spell Sean, if you did not know. Send me an email. If you want to put up an iTunes review because you listen and you realize you haven't put up an iTunes review for the Sports Geek podcast, simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes and it will take you straight to the iTunes store. And one last thing, if you are planning to go to SEAT in San Francisco, I'm meeting with Christine Stoffel later in the week. I've had some early emails backwards and forwards because Christine's a lot like me. She's always working. Ticket sales are strong, and we will be putting up the sold out sign. So for those of you who are in Australia and New Zealand and want to come over and go to SEAT, please contact me. One for the pre-SEAT tour that I'm planning, but also I want to get as many in Australia and New Zealanders there because I think there's a wealth of knowledge in Australia and New Zealand. And if you listen back to the podcast with Shane Harmon, when we talk about Australia and New Zealand effectively being a beta platform for bigger markets, because you can see the trends happening here. So SEAT 2014. Secure your tickets, and again, send us a tweet. Tell us you're coming. Tweet SEAT Conference and tell us you're coming. We'd love to put you on a list and know that you're on your way. So that's it from me. Please send me an email, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, with any feedback from the podcast, or even you might need my help. I'm always available to do a workshop, brainstorm, help you with your content, help you with your strategy, help you reach your sponsors. That's what I do when I'm not doing a podcast with clients around the country. So please, you can also send me an email and get me work. That'd be a great way to start 2015. Anyway, that's enough from me. I will talk to you next week. Got a good guest coming up, mate. I'm just going to confirm it, so I won't pre-announce it now. And look forward to a big 2015.
Check out which teams work with Sports Geek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients. Find all Sports Geek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Like the Sports Geek podcast? Find us on facebook.com/sportsgeek. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek podcast.